The first time we realized we weren't alone out there, it didn't come with drama or fear. It came quietly, in the way something changes before you notice it's already different. Our property sits at the edge of dense woodland, the kind of place where the trees grow close and the light thins early in the afternoon. For generations, this land had been worked, walked, hunted, and respected. We thought we knew every sound it made. We were wrong. It started with the woods going silent. Anyone who spends time in the wild knows that silence isn't peaceful. It's alert. Birds stopped calling. Insects seemed to pause mid-song. Even the wind felt like it was holding its breath. At first, we brushed it off. Weather changes, animal movement, coincidence. But the silence kept returning, always in the same places, always at the same times, early morning and just before dusk. Then came the footprints. Large, deep impressions along the muddy creek bed after a heavy rain. No boot pattern, no tread, just massive, elongated shapes with a weight that sank far deeper than any human step should. We measured them once, carefully, almost nervously. Over 16 inches long, wide, heavy. The stride between them was unnatural, long and confident, like whatever made them didn't need to rush. We told ourselves it was misidentified bear tracks, even though they didn't match anything we could find. Bears don't walk like that. Bears don't leave footprints with a heel that presses down last. Bears don't cross open ground in a straight, deliberate line. The sounds came next. Not howls or roars, not anything you could easily dismiss as an animal call. It was more like vocalizations, deep, resonant, and controlled. A low hum that vibrated through the chest. Wood knocks followed, sharp and intentional, echoing from different points in the forest as if something was communicating across distance. One knock, pause, 2 knocks in response. This happened more than once. Enough times that coincidence stopped being a comfort. At night, the feeling changed. You could sense eyes on you, even when nothing was visible. The darkness felt occupied. We started noticing movement just beyond the tree line, shapes that were too tall, too upright, gliding rather than walking. They never fully stepped into the light. They didn't need to. It was as if they understood boundaries better than we did. One evening, while sitting near the fire pit, we heard footsteps circling the clearing. Slow, heavy, intentional, each step placed carefully, avoiding dry branches. That alone told us this wasn't an animal acting on instinct. Something was aware of us, studying us. The smell hit shortly after, a strong, musky odor, earthy and sour, like wet leaves mixed with something distinctly animal. It lingered long after the footsteps stopped. We never saw a full face that night, but we saw the outline. Tall, broad shoulders, arms hanging longer than human proportions. It stood just beyond the firelight, watching. Not threatening, not retreating, just present. When it finally moved, it didn't crash away like a startled deer. It stepped back calmly, melting into the trees as if the forest itself had opened to let it pass. After that, the encounters increased. Apples left on the porch would vanish overnight, taken without disturbing anything else. Gates would be opened, not broken. Tools moved from one spot to another, as if examined and returned with curiosity. Once, we found a small pile of smooth stones arranged neatly near the creek, something that hadn't been there the day before. No one in the family claimed it. No reason existed for it to be there, except as a sign. We began to understand something important. These beings weren't passing through. They were already here, long before us, long before fences and property lines and names on paper. The old ones, as we started calling them, seemed less like animals and more like neighbors who had tolerated us quietly, observing whether we were worth acknowledging. Fear gave way to respect. We stopped carrying weapons when walking the property. Not out of bravado, but out of instinct. Something about the encounters suggested that aggression would be a mistake. Instead, we spoke aloud when moving through the woods, announcing ourselves the way you might when entering someone else's home. The atmosphere shifted when we did that. The woods felt less tense, less watchful. One morning, just after sunrise, we saw one clearly for the first time. It stood across the creek, partially obscured by mist. The height was undeniable, well over 7 feet. Its body was covered in dark, matted hair, moving slightly in the breeze. But what struck us most wasn't its size. It was its posture, upright, balanced, intelligent. It tilted its head slightly, as if studying us with the same curiosity we felt toward it. There was no panic, no urge to run, just a shared moment of awareness. Then, without sound, it stepped backward into the trees and was gone. The encounter lasted maybe 10 seconds. It changed everything. From that point on, we stopped trying to prove anything. No cameras set up in obvious places. No chasing evidence. No shouting into the woods. We realized that whatever the old ones were, they controlled the terms of contact. And they seemed to appreciate restraint. The younger animals on the property began behaving differently too. Deer avoided certain paths. Coyotes kept their distance. Even the dogs refused to go near specific sections of the woods, standing stiff and alert, hackles raised, staring into empty space and whining softly. Animals know. They always have. One winter night brought the most unsettling encounter of all. Snow covered the ground, and moonlight lit the clearing like a pale spotlight. From the window, we saw movement near the tree line. Not one shape, but two. They stood apart from each other, both watching the house. Larger than before. Older, maybe. Their presence felt heavier, ancient. This wasn't curiosity. This was assessment. They didn't approach. They didn't threaten. They stood there long enough to be seen, long enough to be understood. Then one of them made a low vocal sound, deep and resonant, that vibrated through the glass. Not a warning, not a challenge. It felt more like a statement. After that night, things settled. The encounters became less frequent but more meaningful. A single footprint appearing where it couldn't be ignored. A distant knock answered by another far away. The sense of being watched faded into a feeling of coexistence. Like an unspoken agreement had been reached. We believe now that these beings are not monsters or myths. They are something older, smarter, more aware than we give them credit for. They avoid us not because they fear us, but because they understand us. They know what humans do to what they don't understand. And they choose to remain just beyond reach. This land was never truly ours. We were allowed to live on it. And as long as we respected that balance, the old ones let us stay. We still walk the property. Still listen to the woods. Still feel that quiet awareness at dusk. And sometimes, when the forest goes silent and the air feels heavy with presence, we nod into the trees. Not in fear, not in challenge, but in acknowledgement, because some legends aren't meant to be proven. They're meant to be respected.